She did, but I'd heard stories through the years that Bing Crosby always thought of himself as a golfer who sang. And Karen, for as much as she loved to sing...
Have you ever watched someone carry grief for over 4 decades and still find a way to speak about it with love instead of bitterness? That is what Richard Carpenter has done since February 4th, 1983, the day his sister Karen stopped breathing on the floor of their parents' home in Downey, California. He was 36 years old then. He is 79 now, and in the years between, he has guarded her legacy, revisited her story, and broken his silence in ways that reveal not just a brother still in mourning, but a man who understood her better than anyone and blames himself for not being able to save her. The siblings who built a sound the world could not resist. Richard Lynn Carpenter was born on October 15, 1946, at Grace New Haven Hospital in New Haven, Connecticut, the same hospital where his sister Karen would be born 4 years later on March 2, 1950. Their parents, Harold Bertram Carpenter and Agnes Ruhr Tatum, raised both children in New Haven before the family relocated to Downey, California in 1963, a move that would eventually place them at the center of American popular music history. From a young age, Richard showed an exceptional preoccupation with music. While his peers gravitated towards sports and social activities, he spent his time collecting records, listening obsessively to the radio, and absorbing the arrangements of artists who shaped mid-century American pop. By 16, he was participating in professional recording sessions. That level of seriousness was not performance. It was a calling. He enrolled at California State University, Long Beach, to study music formally, and it was there that his trajectory permanently altered. He met conductor and composer Frank Pooler, who would later help shape the Carpenters' vocal approach, and lyricist John Bettis, who would co-write some of the duo's most beloved songs. He also discovered something he had always known but never fully articulated, that his sister Karen possessed one of the rarest singing voices he had ever heard. Richard formed the Richard Carpenter Trio in 1965 with Karen and bassist Wes Jacobs, a piano trio that performed jazz-influenced material and began entering talent competitions. They won the Hollywood Bowl Battle of the Bands in 1966, which brought them to the attention of industry professionals, but the road to a record deal was longer than a single contest victory. The trio evolved into a band called Spectrum, which folded after failing to secure a contract. And then, as a duo, Richard and Karen began sending demo tapes to record labels. A&M Records founder Herb Alpert heard a demo Karen had recorded and recognized something unusual in her voice. The Carpenters signed with A&M in April 1969. Their first single was a cover of the Beatles' Ticket to Ride, released that same year. It charted respectably, but the song that changed everything was They Long to Be Close to You, a Burt Bacharach and Hal David composition that Richard rearranged in a way that made it sound completely new. It reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the summer of 1970 and never really left the cultural conversation again. What followed across the next 5 years was a run of commercial success so sustained that it became difficult to fully absorb. We've only just begun. Rainy Days and Mondays, Superstar, Top of the World, Yesterday, Once More, Goodbye to Love. Please, Mr. Postman. 12 top 10 hits in 5 years. 4 Grammy Awards. More than 100 million records sold worldwide. President Richard Nixon invited them to the White House in 1972 and called them Young America at its best. They had their own NBC television variety special, their own Vegas residency, and a level of mainstream dominance that made them simultaneously beloved and, in certain corners of the music press, dismissed as too clean, too wholesome, too soft for the era of rock and roll rebellion. Karen played drums with a skill that regularly stunned musicians who had never seen her perform live. She was not a vocalist who happened to sit behind a kit. She was a trained drummer with an instinctive feel for rhythm, who also happened to possess one of the most naturally gorgeous contralto voices in the history of American pop. Richard knew both things about her from the beginning. He built the Carpenters' entire sonic architecture around what her voice could do. What stood out most about their success was not the volume of it, but the consistency. Hit after hit landed not because of manufactured trends or aggressive promotion alone, but because the records were genuinely well made. Richard's arrangements were sophisticated without being cold, warm without being sentimental, and precise in a way that reflected an almost obsessive attention to craft. He was not a frontman. He was the creative engine behind everything the duo released, and he operated that engine with a level of care that very few producers in any era have matched. And what was building quietly behind the scenes of all that success would test him in ways that fame had not prepared him for. Stay with me, because the next chapter changes everything. Two crises running parallel. By the mid-1970s, the pressures of constant touring, relentless recording schedules, and the weight of sustaining a commercial empire were taking visible tolls on both siblings, though in different ways and at different speeds. Karen's relationship with her body had begun to fracture years earlier. As a teenager, she had been called chubby and had started dieting in response. When she slimmed down from 145 to 120 pounds, the people around her praised the change, not understanding that they were reinforcing a pattern that would eventually kill her. By the mid-1970s, her weight had dropped to a skeletal 90 pounds, and sold-out tours had to be cancelled. Audiences gasped when she appeared on stage in sleeveless dresses. Critics noted her bony frame in reviews. The word anorexia nervosa was so new that even the people who worked with her daily did not know how to pronounce it, let alone how to treat it. Richard was struggling with something different, but equally serious. The relentless pace of the Carpenters' schedule had left him dealing with insomnia, panic attacks, and depression. A family member had given him his first Quaalude, telling him it would help him sleep. The pill worked, and then he needed more pills to get the same effect. His tolerance grew, his consumption escalated, and by his own account, he lost the will to do much of anything. At the peak of his addiction, the 6-foot-tall musician weighed a skeletal 140 pounds. In 1978, the Carpenters stopped touring entirely, and in January 1979, semi-comatose backstage, Richard fell down a flight of stairs and finally confronted what had become of him. He checked himself into a 6-week treatment program at the Menninger Clinic in Topeka, Kansas, and emerged from it sober. While Richard was in treatment, Karen made a decision that would come to define a painful chapter in her own story. She flew to New York and recorded a solo album with producer Phil Ramone, working with Billy Joel's band and creating music that was markedly different from the Carpenters' sound. It was more sophisticated, more adult, more emotionally exposed. The album revealed what Karen was capable of as an artist in her own right, outside the framework Richard had built for her. Richard did not respond well to what he heard. He listened to the completed record and told A&M Records that he did not think it should be released. The album, which would have been titled Karen Carpenter, was shelved and remained unreleased until 1996, 13 years after Karen's death. It has since been recognized by many music critics and historians as one of the most important documents in her catalog. A fully realized artistic statement from a woman who never got to release it while she was alive. That decision has followed Richard for decades. He has addressed it in interviews, consistently explaining that he believed the album did not represent Karen at her best, that it was too far removed from what their audience expected, and that the timing was wrong. Others have argued that it was a missed opportunity that compounded her isolation and frustration at a time when she desperately needed to feel valued. The truth likely contains elements of both positions. What is undeniable is that Karen was hurt by it. Richard has spoken about that period with honesty that does not diminish the sting. He has said plainly that Karen was more than his creative partner. She was his best friend. And yet, the professional decision he made about her solo work created a distance between them that neither of them fully repaired before she died. That weight has never entirely left him. He carries it with the kind of quiet accountability that cannot be resolved by interviews or tribute posts alone. It lives in the space between what he knew about her and what he was unable to prevent. Behind every choice he made was a man who believed he understood what Karen needed better than she did. What happened next revealed how much that belief cost them both. Keep watching. The day Karen died, and what Richard carried out of that morning. Karen Carpenter spent 1982 in New York receiving treatment for anorexia nervosa from psychotherapist Stephen Levenkron, who worked with eating disorders in ways that were considered pioneering at the time. She had invested enormously in the treatment, financially and emotionally. She moved into a hotel suite near Central Park, paid for sessions that cost $2,000 a month, and submitted herself to confrontational therapeutic techniques designed to force her to see her own condition clearly. In one session, Levenkron had her change into a bikini and stand before a mirror. She looked at herself and told him she thought she was gaining weight. She weighed 77 pounds. In September of that year, she told her therapist that her heart was beating irregularly and that she had been feeling dizzy. She was admitted to Lenox Hill Hospital, where a feeding tube inserted to nourish her accidentally punctured one of her lungs. She was released in time for Thanksgiving 1982 after doctors declared her medically stable. She had gained some weight. She seemed to be improving. In late 1982, she declared herself cured and ended her treatment against Levenkron's recommendation. She moved back to California. On February 4th, 1983, Karen was staying at her parents' home in Downey. That morning, her mother Agnes went to call her for coffee and got no answer. She went upstairs to the bedroom. She found Karen lying motionless on the wardrobe floor. She was admitted to the local hospital at 9:23 in the morning. She was pronounced dead at 9:51. She was 32 years old. The cause of death was heart failure, brought on by the physiological damage anorexia nervosa had inflicted on her body over years. Richard has talked about that morning across different decades and different interviews, each time revealing another layer of what it meant to lose her. He has said that her death shook him in ways he did not immediately understand, that grief and guilt became so intertwined that separating them was nearly impossible. He had recovered from his own addiction. He had watched her struggle with hers. He had believed at various points that she was getting better. And then she was gone, on a February morning in the house where their family had lived, in the city where they had grown up and become famous together. He has been direct about his belief that the medical establishment failed Karen. The doctors, the therapists, the institutional understanding of anorexia nervosa in 1982 were all operating with incomplete knowledge. The disorder was so poorly understood that the people treating her were sometimes making things worse without knowing it. Richard has said this not to deflect responsibility from himself, but because he believes it is true, and because Karen deserves to have her death understood in its full context, rather than reduced to a cautionary tale about vanity or self-destruction. Karen's death prompted the first widespread media coverage of anorexia nervosa in American history. It became the catalyst for research, education, and the creation of treatment facilities focused specifically on eating disorders. In a devastating paradox, her passing saved lives that her living presence had not been able to save, because the world had not yet understood what she was facing. Her name is now inseparable from the history of how America came to recognize and begin treating a disorder that affects millions of people. Richard understood the weight of that legacy and accepted it alongside the grief. He did not retreat into silence. He kept working, kept honoring her music, and kept speaking about her with a specificity and love that refused to let her become only a tragedy. What Richard chose to do with the decades after Karen's death says as much about his character as anything in his career. Stay until the end, because what he has built in her name is more than anyone expected. the brother who refused to let her be forgotten. In the years following Karen's death, Richard did not disappear. He married Mary Rudolph on May 19, 1984, just over a year after Karen died, and together they have 5 children. Christy Lynn, born in 1987 and named after the daughter Karen had said she would one day like to have. Tracy Tatum, born in 1989. Mindy Karen, born in 1992. Colin Paul, born in 1994. And Taylor Mary, born in 2000. He built a family in Downey, California, close to the places where he and Karen had grown up and made their music. He released a solo album titled Time in 1987, 4 years after Karen died. It was not a Carpenter's record, and it was not trying to be. He continued producing posthumous Carpenter's compilations that kept Karen's voice in circulation for audiences who had grown up with the duo and for new listeners who were discovering her for the first time. The Carpenters' catalog has never gone quiet. Streaming platforms, film soundtracks, and television placements have ensured that Karen's voice reaches listeners in every generation. The Richard and Karen Carpenter Performing Arts Center opened in 1994 on the campus of California State University, Long Beach, the school where both siblings had studied before rising to fame. The center features a lobby that displays memorabilia from the Carpenters' career and has served as a venue for performances and events that continue to honor their shared legacy. In April 2025, Richard performed a song from the Carpenters' catalog at an event held at the center, one of his most recent public performances. In 2021, he co-authored Carpenters: The Musical Legacy with journalists Mike Sidoni Lennox and Chris May, a book built on hundreds of hours of interviews that Richard gave over the course of its development. The book was described as a nearly note-for-note musical biography of the duo, beginning with their childhoods in New Haven and tracing the arc of every record they made together. It concentrated on the music itself, rather than the personal tragedies, a deliberate choice that Richard explained plainly. He wanted the work to be what people remembered, not only the suffering. He has spoken in recent years about what it means to be the one who survived. He has described Karen as his best friend, not merely his sister or his collaborator, and that precision matters. Best friends are people you choose. The Carpenters were siblings by birth, but their partnership was chosen, renewed daily across years of work and travel and shared creative struggle. When she died, Richard did not just lose a singing partner, he lost the person who had understood him most completely. On March 2nd, 2026, which would have been Karen's 76th birthday, Richard posted a tribute on his Instagram account that reflected everything he has carried. He wrote that her timeless alto was perfect, truly perfect, able to interpret any type of popular song from any era and connect it to millions of listeners across the world. He closed with a declaration that has since been shared widely, that while one should never say never, there will never be another Karen. Richard Carpenter's net worth is estimated at $14 million, a figure that reflects a career built on craft, cataloging, and decades of sustained creative output rather than celebrity spectacle. His value to music history is not measured in that number, but in the persistence with which he has continued to honor a voice that the world lost too soon. At 79, he is still here, still speaking, still posting tributes on the birthday of a sister who died at 32, still insisting that the music is what matters, even as he has never fully let go of the grief that has shaped every year of his life since that February morning in 1983. There is something in that refusal to move on cleanly that speaks to the particular weight of surviving someone you helped build, someone whose genius you recognized before the world did, someone you loved in a way that had no clean category because it was professional and familial and deeply personal all at once. Breaking his silence? For Richard has never been a single dramatic event. It has been a lifetime of careful, honest statements delivered across decades to anyone willing to listen. The silence he has broken is the silence that grief often demands, the silence that says the dead are gone, and what is gone should be left to rest. Richard Carpenter has refused that silence. He keeps talking about Karen because he believes she deserves to be talked about with accuracy, with love, and with the full weight of what was lost when the world lost her voice. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss a video. Drop a comment below and tell us what the music of the Carpenters has meant to you, and share this with someone who grew up listening to Karen's voice.